That's right, siblings. It was only a matter of time. Today we're building not one epic hero, but two. Angron and Kharn. The two models that complete the World Eater's army that I showcased in my last video. Today I'll be building and painting both of them together, starting with Kharn. Now you all know I love to customize, but when it comes to this model, I'm actually quite limited because of the way he's posed and how they arranged him on the sprue. It's not ideal, but we'll do what we can for our first captain. First, I cut and clean everything before I start assembling the torso, so I can actually start visualizing what I want to do with this model. He has these chains that wrap around his bare arm and hang off, but the dangly bits feel a bit silly and distracting. So I'm gonna break them off and do some sanding so nothing sticks out anymore. It looks decent enough, and will look even better with paint. So then I move on to thinking about how I want him to stand on his base. I don't like how horizontal his stock pose is, so I think I'm going to try and lean him back a bit so he's standing more upright. To do that, I'll need to grab some fresh toes, cut and glue at just the right angle to fix his posture. Then I start getting his base ready by busting out some scenic corkboard. I glue down one layer, then I start breaking it off and whittling it down with my clippers and my fingers. So it's roughly the shape that I desire before dry fitting exactly where I want to glue him down on the base itself. For balance, I decided to add a little dead space marine next to his feet, a recent victim perhaps. Now that Kharn is set, I choose a backpack to give him, since his stock backpack is actually quite small. So I give him one from the Possess sprue to make him more demonic. This looks pretty sick, and it's just about finished. But I realized that I have a better bit to use instead of the Dead Space Marine. This pile of skulls from Angron's sprue. They fit perfectly and are far more thematic. So I cut and clean the area again and glue them down. And they fit perfectly. Thus completing my Khârn the Betrayer model. Next is his father, the Demon Primarch, who comes on some very imposing sprues, as Primarchs usually do. I start this mighty task by cutting and cleaning up his torso parts. Now the one change that I know I want to make with this mini is the tail. I don't like his brontosaurus tail end, very controversial, but I think I'm gonna swap it out. So I grab a spare tail from the trusty Chaos Manticore kit from Warhammer the Old World to replace it. It just takes a couple cuts and a little sanding to get the ends ready before I glue them together. They fit together quite well, so I won't need to do much blending work, thankfully. Then I just attach his butt as well as his legs, giving me a good idea of how big he really is. Next, I'm going to build his face. I want to make him a touch more expressive, so I use some green stuff to kind of extend his jaw slightly. I didn't do a very good job, but that's okay. We'll just say they're battle scars. Angron's an ugly son of a bitch anyways. Then I glue that on and attach his cable braids. After that, his wings go on. They go on easily enough. And after that is his arms. I'm not going to be doing any radical reposing here, but I will be raising his sword arm a bit higher with some green stuff to make him a little more unique. I put a big wad into his arm socket, and I just kind of mess with it until it's the angle that I want. The axe holding arm I just glue on like normal. Now that all his limbs are in place, I can finish adding the rest of his armor plates and doodads. After that, it is corkboard time once again. I want to get Angron here to lean back a little bit, just like I did with Kharn, so his front details can be more visible. To do that, I glue his base to a big piece, and then I'll make a bigger one to go under that, along with another smaller chunk to make a kind of ramp. Now, like this, Angron looks like he's bursting over an embankment, rather than yelling at the ground. Then I just glue all the pieces together, taking time to kind of weld down every edge I can find, so the base is nice and solid. Then to fill the gaps here and kind of blend these layers together, I pull out some pre-ground cork, start sprinkling it wherever I need it. Mixing that with even more glue binds it all together nicely and also makes some lovely toxic fumes. The result is very rocky and natural looking. To finish off the base, I add the other 2 skull piles found on his sprue. They fill the empty space under him nicely and give him an appropriate amount of skulls. After I glue those down, it's time to sand both of their bases up. I use cheap acrylic paint with a bit of water as the adhesive, painting it all over the rocks, avoiding his feet and the little skulls. I do that for both of them, then I start pouring sand over the wet paint. It's a messy process, but the outcome is very gritty and grimdark when you prime and paint it all, which we will now do. First, I prime them black with some Rust-Oleum, before starting with the red flesh tones, using Gal Vorbak from Warhammer color. I like to start with a more violet toned dark red for flesh bits, just to make them feel more organic and kind of separate them from the red cloth that I like to do. Then I go over all that again with Word Bearer's red, before I go and highlight with Mephiston red to really get that devil skin looking right. I find that a pure, vibrant red is a good enough highlight color for red stuff. Anything else would ruin the blood red hue that I crave. I take my time doing this in thin and dry layers over all their exposed skin and mutated flesh bits. Eventually this builds into a nice deep crimson. Once I'm happy with the skin, I move on to the brass armor. For the first layer, I use Evil Chrome from the Army Painters, covering basically all of their gear. This process also takes a little while, but they already look awesome with this paint. I'm not going to be painting Kharn in his traditional color scheme. Instead, I'm going to be painting him in the same color scheme as his father, just like the rest of my World Eaters warband, the Rejected, who worship their father as a paternal deity. Next, I'll take some red copper mixed with gemstone red from the Army Painters War Paints line. I'll mix those two together to make a brassy metallic red that I'm going to use to dab on the centers of all the armor panels and loosely avoiding the trim. Doing this kind of gives a hint of that classic red and gold look without having to try too hard. I'll also use some Army Painter glittering green to very lightly highlight the worlds on his World Eater emblems. I'll also take some time to paint all their tubes black. And while I'm at that, I paint Angron's cables with some lead belcher, along with any other metal gears or weapons, like Angron's sword, Samni Aureus. To highlight that lead belcher, I'll do a very light dry brushing of AK silver. Then for all of their skulls and spines, I start with some Xandri dust, making sure to get every one of Angron's many spikes. Then I'll highlight each one of those again with some Ushabti bone, making sure to bring out those skull faces especially. Once that's all done, I go ahead and paint Angron's leather tassels with Word Bearer's red to match his badass 30k color scheme. I'll also use that same color to start coloring the bases. This might look a little crazy right now, but I'll be going over this with some earthy tones for a bloody sand look after this. Starting with some Vallejo flat earth, followed by some more Xandri dust, and a bit of Ushabti bone on the skulls once again. Now I just need to touch up the last few details. One detail that I cannot afford to neglect, of course, is Kharn's Hatsune Miku pigtails. To do that, I'll use some Vallejo medium blue, followed by a light dry brushing of Vallejo sky blue. This is very kawaii, but it's a bit too clean for my warband. So I'll paint the tips of the pigtails red, like they've been stained in blood a bit. So now he has a lovely chaos balayage. Now, to really make these minis pop, let's do some green plasma. These days I use Rainforest from Army Painter for my glowy bits. I lay down a nice wet layer inside the skulls and his sword, and on Kharn's pistol and lenses. Then I dry brush lightly around each spot, and also wherever the light may be shining from the light source on the model, which can be a bit tricky, so you have to work with a bone dry brush. Then to complete the effect, I'll do a quick highlight of white paint to really make these parts light up. We don't need no airbrush here, but we do need some panel liner, the miracle elixir. This stuff will instantly make whatever you're applying it to hella grimdark, so we're gonna use a lot here, of course, on these bad boys, especially these skulls. Once I'm satisfied with that, there's only one step left for an Eater of Worlds, and that's some blood effect paints. Here I'm using True Blood and Dried Blood from the Army Painter. One a lighter tone and one a darker tone, so that my gore splatters look nice and chunky and realistic. Now I just need to paint their base rims black, and this project will be complete.
Angron, the Lord of the Red Sands, the Prince of Blood, the Demon Primarch of Khârn, and the unwilling master of the 12th Legion. Death cannot hold him, for in demonhood he is beyond such things. No matter how many times he is slain, his sons will always be there to summon him back from the infernal tempest of the warp. For eternity, he is damned to serve the Skull Throne, a slave to the Lord of Murder until the end of time. But at least, he is not alone. He has his sons after all, and by his side once again, the greatest of them, Khârn the Betrayer, the first captain of the World Eaters, the champion of the Blood God. He has been summoned from across the galaxy to fight by his father's side once more. Blessed and enhanced by the unholy aura of the Demon Primarch, mutating his flesh as the crimson of his battle plate is burned away in warp fire to leave only the bare brass of his ancient and corrupted power armor. His mind lost to a pure and overwhelming rage. A black and terrible fury that eclipses even the agony of the butcher's nails. In this blood-raged state, Kharn is at his strongest and closest to his deity. For no matter how far he may run, he is forever bound to his lords of destruction. I think that these turned out pretty good. Here they are side by side, father and son. And just for fun, here's a brotherly comparison, as well as a cousin's duel. And of course, here they are with the rest of the rejected. The warband is at last complete and reunited with their dread father. This also completes today's video. I hope you all enjoyed this little double feature build. Hopefully I can get them on the tabletop soon to crush some Imperials. Anyway, until next time, I wish you all the very best.